Hello, Frog fans. Welcome to Post Game Beers Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Malloy, joined by my co-host, Jacob Sailors. We have another awesome episode for you today. For the fourth year in a row now, we've been very fortunate to have some time with the leader of the program, head coach, Kirk Saarloos. Kirk, thanks for joining us on Game Week today.
I'll tell you what, your guys' production from year 1 to year 5 now, or year 4, is simply amazing.
We appreciate that.
It has to be the best show in college baseball around the country. I mean, you guys are doing an awesome job. So thanks for supporting the Frogs.
With some of the audio that D1 puts out, I mean, I think we kind of rival them at this point.
I know. I think you guys need to do a collab with them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I imagine you won't be able to join us pregame on Saturday, but we're excited to announce a new partnership with Coors Light. So choose chill. Join us at Texas Live at Sports and Social prior to the TCU Arkansas game. We'll be there at 4 o'clock. We'd love to have Frog fans come and join us for a beer before we watch the Frogs take on the Razorbacks. So, guessing that's not.
Make sure the mountains are blue.
Oh, yeah. The refreshing taste of the Rockies. We've long enjoyed the refreshing taste of the Rockies out at Lupton and pre and post game. So we're excited to have them on as a partner. And Coach, just to be clear, he wasn't uninviting you. You're very welcome to come by.
Well, here's the deal. Here's what we'll do. I'll pay for the first $500 of Coors Lights for any Frog fans that want to join, hang out with you guys before our game.
Well, that's okay.
Wow.
All right. I need a sound of, yeah, the crowd loves it.
Thanks, Coach. That's awesome. Yeah, we'll be sure to hype that up if that's all right with you. So
absolutely.
All right. Hey,
nice.
I know this is probably I don't know if it's a fun time of year for you, or if it's kind of like let's get to the Friday, because I'm sure you're tired of talking about the team. There's no results to break down. There's nothing you can yell at the players for quite yet. Are you tired of talking about 2026 team?
A little bit. I mean, it's the same question all the time. You know, you see Frog fans around at basketball games around town, and everybody's super excited, wants to know how the team looks. And I'm excited that we don't have to play each other anymore. You know, our guys are tired of playing each other. Our pitchers are tired of the hitters. The hitters are tired of the pitchers. And I'm looking forward to playing somebody else and getting this thing going. It's like, you know, the week leading up to Christmas. You know, Christmas is coming, but we still got some work to do the next couple of days before Friday.
So before we talk about this year, we have to put a bow on last year. And the main question I want to ask is, we all know how the year ended in Corvallis. And, you know, talking to some of the players, they say, you know what, we just got cold at the wrong time. And that happens. But I want to ask this. We're probably not in that position traveling to Corvallis, playing a team like Oregon State, if we kind of close out several weekends along the way. Maybe some teams we should have swept where we only won 2 out of 3. Maybe some series we should have won where we only got 1 out of the 3. So what were the lessons learned from last year going into this year and kind of really taking hold of a weekend instead of just, you know, kind of doing the minimum expectation, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, you always look back at the end of the season and wonder, okay, we were probably the first team on the outside looking back in terms of hosting. Obviously, you win the last game against Arizona in the conference championship. You're a host, and then you go back and you look at a multitude of games and situations where, you know, if you just win a game here or a game there, you feel like you're probably hosting. So I think ultimately it comes down to you have to take care of your own business. I think I said it in a different podcast with maybe Kendall or somebody where you know, it's like leaving a 2-strike call in the umpire's hand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you don't like it, swing the bat. And for us, I think that's ultimately what we have to do a better job of is and I don't think we did a poor job of it. We just didn't win enough games last year.
Right.
And so, you know, I think hosting a regional, the numbers dictate that you have a better chance of going to the super regionals by hosting a regional. So I think last year's team, you know, I look back on it after the season was over, and it was Anthony Silva, and I'm trying to think. I think he might have been the only guy on the field that had postseason experience in terms of being in regional. So it was a very, you know, young group. This group now has a taste of what it's like to go on the road for a regional, and the difference between, I think their mindset is trying to be the best they can be, but at the same time, understanding that no matter if it's a Tuesday game or if it's a Friday game or it's a Sunday game where you're trying to sweep or win a series, I mean, they're all big. So I think they have a really good idea of what that looks like, and, not to look ahead, but at the same time, trying to go 1-0 every single day.
Sure.
With the exception of one vote, Frogs were the unanimous pick to win the Big 12. From my understanding, you can't vote for your own team. So
you know who I voted for.
What did you see? What do you see in the Arizona squad?
Well, I mean, that's a really good team. They got two guys on the front end of their rotation that I feel like are both Friday night guys. They had, I don't know if you saw the news today, but their closer, who I thought was a guy that should have been drafted anyway, their closer just found out that he has to have Tommy John surgery, so they're going to miss him for the year. But really well coached team, talented team, and the reigning Big 12 conference tournament champs. I thought, overall pitching always wins, and I thought that them on the front end with those first two guys, they'll have plenty of depth. But I thought, their first two Friday and Saturday starters are as good as anybody around the country.
Yeah, it was kind of a joke, but I appreciate that honest feedback. We saw that and we're like, well, guess we know who we voted for. So your fifth year coaching now. Obviously, we talked about being projected high throughout the national media. Would you prefer to have an obviously talented team that is being talked about this way, or do you kind of like to be slept on a little bit and not really think about rankings?
Well, probably both, to be honest. Like, the rankings for me are very fan based. It's to get excitement around a fan base or around college baseball in general. I mean, we have every team pretty much. I think 4 of the 6 teams this weekend are all ranked high, and you don't really know what you got until you start playing other people. You feel good about what you bring back in terms of, plate appearances and innings pitched from guys and the guys that you've brought in as well to help fill the gaps on what you weren't able to bring back. So I think there's some positive to it, but at the same time, our guys have done a really good job of not really taking the cheese on that and kind of just going about their business and understanding that, it's going to be a fun weekend, but it's going to be one weekend of 14. So, it's a long season, 56 games, and making sure that we're playing our best baseball as we continue to go out through the season.
I have a 2-part question that these are similarly related, but one, is this the most talented roster you've had since you've been at TCU?
I mean, it's hard to say. I think that in certain aspects it is. I mean, I think back to the 2016 team started preseason number 1 and made it all the way to Omaha, and that team was pretty dang good. I remember coming back after going to the series in 15 and look back at our first team meeting, and you're like, gosh dang, every single one of these guys that we just went to the World Series with is back. It's kind of what you felt like with UCLA this year. Right. UCLA feels the same way, that they took that whole sophomore class, to the World Series, and now everybody came back, and you're looking around going, man, there's expectations with that, but at the same time, that's really fun to see. But I think it's a talented team, but ultimately, we have talented players. Now it's about being a talented team. And I said that in the fall when we played Texas State and A&M. We hadn't played a lot of baseball yet, so I thought we were talented, gifted physically, but we weren't yet a team. And I feel like in the last 6 weeks that these guys have been back on campus, I feel like this is a talented team.
So the second part of the question is kind of in a more broad-based sense. Now, I attended the Neely School of Business, and they taught us how important it is to develop an overall corporate strategy. And in a lot of ways, you do that with this program. So after the Omaha team in 2023, it seemed like the strategy was to bring in a lot of transfers to make out the roster. And now we see that it's more, youth-based with extremely talented freshmen and growing them up. Is that the preferred path you want to continue down, or is it just situation dictates you kind of go back and forth?
I think every year is different. I think obviously with this year's team, we had a really talented freshman class that we were able to take care of, and they all came back, and I think so when you have that, your holes are a little bit less, and so you don't have to go into the portal as much. I think in this day and age, experience wins, and that experience could be a group of freshmen that grew up last year together and are back this year. It can also be you go in the transfer portal and you go get a bunch of experienced players where you're getting 22, 23-year-old guys out of the portal, like, Cole Kramer, guys like that have a ton of at-bats. So, but we're always going to hang our hat on building our roster from high school, because I feel like we've done a good job over the last couple of years. I mean, we've had 7 or 8 guys over the last 2 drafts that have turned down considerable amount of money to come to school. And with that, you're able to build, I feel like, a culture through your players where they're going to be here for more than 1 year. And, you look, Georgia does it all through transfer portal.
Right.
I think they brought in 20 guys. Arizona State brought in 20 guys. We brought in just a handful of transfer portal guys because we've done a really good job of identifying the right high school player that's talented, but also getting them to school. So that's not always going to be the case. So I think it's a different kind of set of circumstances every year.
Mm-hmm.
With the draft being after the portal closes, it makes it very kind of nerve-wracking, because the portal closes on July 1st and the draft happens on July 13th.
Yeah.
So you could, get your whole high school class decimated by the draft and then have nobody to go pick up in the portal. So we have to do a really good job speaking with agents, speaking with clubs, speaking with our players about their intentions and what they're thinking about doing, so that way we can make sure that we have the right talent here year in and year out.
And one quick follow-up to that, do you guys have a unique advantage compared to most schools when it comes to high school recruiting?
I don't think so. I think everybody has their pluses, everybody has their negatives. I think one of our negatives prior to this whole rev share NIL scene was that TCU's super expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And we had 11.7 scholarships, and there wasn't any NIL and there wasn't any rev share. So now all of a sudden, the academic scholarship and the baseball scholarship and maybe some financial aid only lends. I mean, Nick Lodolo, for heaven's sakes, back in 2017, turned down the draft as the 41st pick overall and had $20,000 that he had to pay to come to TCU. He was on a 65% scholarship.
Dang.
So you're talking about a guy that turned down almost $2 million to come to TCU and pay $20,000 a year.
He should have opened a Patreon.
So, now with rev share and scholarships being
It's
bumped
illegal.
up in terms of the amount of scholarships we have, at least the financial side of things, we can make sure that guys that are turning down considerable amount of money aren't having to come here and pay anything.
Sure.
Not that you want to expand the transfer portal window, but has there been any discussion on changing those dates so that if there's not that conflict of not knowing who your team's going to be before the draft?
Well, I'd like to have the portal do for baseball what they did for football and basketball, where it's 2 weeks, I believe.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And because I think when you have a month-long transfer portal, there's so many things that happen. And I think if you have a 2-week period and have the draft before the portal opens. So have the draft back to what it used to be. There's no perfect time, because before the negative was the draft was happening during regionals and super regionals. And that's why they moved it away from that until after the season was over. Well, now with the transfer portal, I think the big thing now is we have to get it back to where it's before the portal opens, in my opinion. And I think you have it, whether it's, the couple days between super regionals and the World Series, sometime in that middle part of that week, and then the portal opens, say on June 30th, or it opens on maybe the day after the World Series ends to July 1st. Something like that, where all of a sudden now we can kind of start it'd almost be like, asking football if they had a NFL draft after the portal. I mean, there's no chance that would ever happen in college football. So for us, I think it just makes a lot of sense if we can get the draft in front of when the portal closes.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the team a little bit. So last year we were breaking down the offense and I asked the guys what looks like now a pretty stupid question. So I said, are we assuming Noah Franco will have the biggest impact as a freshman, or could someone like Stroh-Snyder compete for a starting job? Right, that was a real question. So,
well, after the first week, was probably a good question, right?
Yeah, right.
Started slow, but it's not how you start; it's how you finish. And so, yeah,
yeah.
So with that said, let's flip the names a little bit. We assume Lucas Franco, obviously, projected to be starter, shortstop. What's another freshman name that you expect to have a large impact this year?
Brady Dallimore.
Yeah.
He looks different in a uniform. Big physical catcher. Has also played some first base when Rob Liddington had that little fracture in his leg. We came back and had Brady take some ground balls over there at first. He's really athletic, does a good job, but is a really good catcher as well. So I feel like, he's done really good since he's been back and put himself in a great position. Another guy that for me has really probably done more than any freshman just in terms of where he was coming in summer until where he is now was Cade Nelson. Cade had shoulder surgery August of his junior year of high school. So he missed his whole senior year of high school, missed all of our fall inter-squad games, and we saw him for the first time live on the mound the beginning of January. And he's done really, really well in terms of coming back, because usually shoulder injuries, those are the ones that are scary. An elbow injury, Tommy John, guys usually come back from that. Shoulder surgeries are the ones that I don't want to say it's 50-50, but it's not far off from that in terms of regaining what you previously were. And Cade was a guy that we felt when we committed him, if he kept kind of progressing the way we thought, we might not get him, because 6'5" righties that were, in his junior year, he was 90 to 92, good pitcher's body. You felt like he was going to continue to gain some velocity. We didn't think we'd get him. Well, we got him because of the injury, and now where he's at, he's done a really good job of just pitching. A guy that hadn't seen live action for 2 years. We feel like he's done a really good job of putting himself in a great spot where we're going to utilize him quite a bit. The other guy that we're waiting to see is, Uli Fernsler, lefty from Michigan that, we'll see him. He'll get some live, sim game on Thursday, which will be nice for him to face hitters for the first time. We're going to take him along slowly, make sure that, it's we're not putting too much on his plate too soon. He had that little hiccup in terms of having a knee surgery in the summer.
Yeah.
So, but we feel good about him. Our whole freshman, we only have 6 of them.
Yeah.
And CJ Mascaro's had some
hurt.
flashes, and Aiden Barriente's has had some flashes, but I think, you have those 3 guys for sure with Lucas, Brady, and Cade, that have done a really, really good job.
Thanks for answering my Uli Fernsler question before I could ask it. I'll just cross that one off. So I wanted to ask you, so we kind of go through and we try to predict what the depth chart would look like. And I feel like this year has kind of been one of the easier years to do it with all the guys returning. But then I look at the left side of the infield, and it feels like there's 4 guys there that could realistically start games, but you only have 2 positions. Is it out of the realm of possibility that all 4 of these guys could get a start at Globe Life this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility. Like you said, Gamster and Caius and Jack Bell and Lucas, they've all been kind of interchangeable over there on the left side. I think we're going to probably face – it's probably going to go right, left, which on this weekend in terms of who we're facing from the mound. So I think you might see some guys on that third day where all of a sudden, another guy gets an opportunity just because of a matchup situation. But we feel really good about all 4 of those guys. That's the great thing I think we've found, is that we only have 33 healthy bodies. And we feel really good about the fact that we've spent so much time and we've invested in, there's a smaller amount of players, so you don't feel like people are getting left behind. Sometimes when you only have 4 coaches and you have a 45-man roster or whatever it was the last couple of years, there's just so many bodies that guys don't get enough at bats. And with this group, we feel really good about, whether it be Lucas Franco at short or Jack Bell at short or Caius or Preston or really anybody. We feel really good about where we're at from the floor of, our roster in terms of same thing with the pitching side of things.
Yeah.
Any one guy that comes out of the bullpen that pitches for us, we feel good about it. It's not just, we have about 4 or 5 guys hanging out that are going to redshirt, that we know they're going to redshirt. With this club, we feel really good about all 33 being able to help us at some point.
Feels like the DH position could be a rotating door too. Just all the possible guys that could fit in that spot depending on matchup.
A ton.
You mentioned, just real quick, you mentioned on Sunday a lefty. We were kind of hoping Mason Bigsby would get the ball, but
I don't think maybe at some point, but I think we're gonna have a lefty on Sunday.
Okay, well, that's all right.
Is there too much pressure being put on Stroh-Snyder, or is he a guy that can handle that?
Well, I mean, I think he had pressure in his high school senior season, trying to play good enough to go super high in the draft. And so I don't think it's a guy that's just burst onto the scene. I think he, started the season off slow, and then we gave him a day off, and he kind of just tore the rest of the season apart. I think there's going to be some hiccups here and there where he's probably trying to do too much like anybody. I think the great thing is that he has people around him in the lineup to be able where he doesn't feel like he's got to do everything every single game. I think the sooner that he can just settle down and let his athletic ability take over, the better. And at the beginning of every season, it's always interesting too. We look back at like Aaron Judge is the MVP of the American League the last 2 years. Do you know what he hit in spring training in 24 and 25? He had a combined, I think he hit 181 in 24. He hit 200 in 2025, and he struck out more than 50% of his at-bats. So a lot of times when you're working on things and leading up to seasons, people get stressed out about this or that. But ultimately, when the lights come on, I think the main thing is trusting your routine and trusting who you are as a player. And I think Sawyer's really good at that.
Do you openly go ahead, Chick.
No,
I was going to say, do you openly discuss draft status and kind of like how to negate?
No, they all know. I mean, they all know that they put themselves in positions to be able to be high picks.
Yeah.
Whether it's Stroh or whether it's somebody else from years past. And they know, they look at the rankings and these mock drafts that people have no idea what it's going to look like in 6 months from now. So I think, it could take up a lot of, space in your head if you allow it to. And I think the main thing is kind of like preseason rankings. It's, hey, let's try and be the best we can be as a team. Because usually what happens is if your team goals are met, individual goals usually follow that. And very rarely is it, man, I got to take care of me and make sure that I have a great season. Then it becomes more about individuals and less about the team. So I think this team really, truly cares about one another and have the best interests of everybody at heart. And I think that is the best way to go ahead and have a great season, is to make sure that I'm playing for my teammates. They say team first and team last every time they break the huddle at the end of the day. And that's truly, I honestly think that this group feels that way, where they think about their team always the first thing, and the last thing on their mind is always the team.
Real quick on the pitching side, I think this, kind of like with the infield and outfield, it's one of the easier years to kind of predict who's going to slot where. Like with the starting pitchers, you have 4 spots, and then you have Tommy, Brass, Baumler, and Lance Davis. We can just safely assume that's where those guys are going to fall, in whatever order. But what about a guy like Nate Stern? It wouldn't be shocking if he got a Tuesday start sooner than later, right?
Well, I think in a different year, Nate could start quite a bit for us. He started the Big 12 championship game last year. He can start. We've built him up. He's gone 3 or 4 innings multiple times in January and in the beginning part of February. So he's definitely built up to do whatever role we need him to. But like you said, I think we feel good about a handful of guys being able to run out there, Friday through Tuesday. And we feel really good about, guys slotting into different roles kind of in the middle part and back end of the bullpen. So I think the main thing is what you're trying to figure out by week 4 or 5 is, right, this is the 4 starters you have, and these are the guys at the back end of the bullpen, and everybody else is in the middle. So the Tommy will start Friday. I think that's the worst kept secret in TCU baseball history. Is he'll start Friday, and then Brass will be on Saturday, and Lance Davis will be on Sunday. So, and then we'll take care of Tuesday when we get there.
Was that a close competition between Lance Davis and Trevor Baumler?
I think there's a close competition between him, Baumler, Cade Nelson. Like I said, Cade Nelson might have been the best guy on the pitching staff through January and February. Nolan Johnson, who's a guy that was, pitcher of the year in his conference in North Dakota State last year. He's a lefty that just knows how to pitch. He has a chance to be, good for us in a lot of different roles. And we feel good. I think the depth of the pitching staff, whether your rotation the first weekend of the year is never going to be the same rotation at the end of the year.
Sure. Yeah.
Very rarely is it. And so there's going to be some guys that have, that come out of nowhere. There's going to be some guys that all of a sudden force their way into weekend rotation spots. And that's the great part about baseball is you never know what the season's going to bring you. And we feel like there's a lot of guys chomping at the bit.
Martin wanted me to ask you, how many innings can we expect from Cole Eaton? I don't know. He gave me no.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when Louis Rodriguez went down, and then Barrientos had a little bit of a hiccup with his shoulder. Cole came right up to me. He's like, Coach, I can pitch. I did it at Tennessee my freshman year. I can pitch. And so we started throwing bullpens. And so he's a guy that we definitely have up our sleeve in terms of being able to give us some innings for sure.
That's fascinating. Awesome. Okay. All right. MK, what do you have?
All right. So we talked to Chase a couple weeks ago. He mentioned Delora was going to take over at third base, which not something he's unfamiliar with. But is there any dynamic change when you don't have Coach Lawn over there versus Coach Delora, or is the philosophy basically the same? And it's really just about, Coach Mo. Yeah. Really just the sign's the same. You're not really changing much. You expect the guys to perform the same ability.
Yeah. Well, Coach Mo had a knee surgery on middle of November 14 or something like that. He's still having problems in terms of that knee. So he told me, he said, if I can't run out to the third base box, I'm not going out there, which if you see Coach Mo walking around, you can tell it's still bugging him pretty good. So Coach Delara went to he was our third base coach when we went to the World Series, is really good over there. Coach Mo will still call the offense from the dugout, so I don't think there's a ton of things that are going to change in terms of the base running at all. It's just decision-making from a third base coach. Coach Mo's been doing it a super long time, and Coach Delara, has done it before. So we're not really concerned about that at all. I think the main thing is the offense is still going to be run by Coach Mo, and it'll be the first time in 11 years with him that I've actually had him in the dugout while our offense is on the field. He's always been the third base coach. So that'll be fun for me, at least, kind of have him next to me, not only when we're pitching, but also when we're hitting.
I got another one here from Martin. He wants to know what your thoughts are on the new head of coordinating for umpiring using TrackMan data to train and evaluate umpires.
Well, TrackMan's been around for a really long time. And now it's used, like you said, as a tool because basically every Power Four for sure, pretty much every Division I school, maybe a handful of them that don't have it. Mm-hmm. So it's readily available everywhere. And I think it's a great opportunity for, I think umpires to kind of look and see where's my hole that I usually call strikes that maybe are balls and vice versa. One thing that I kind of am concerned a little bit with is that the TrackMan strike zone is a static strike zone. It doesn't change with the height of the player. So whether you're facing Jose Altuve or Aaron Judge in college, that box stays the same in terms of the verticality of it. And in professional baseball, it changes based on the size of the player. So I think it's skewed a little bit in terms of the North and South kind of data. And then also we're talking about college baseball, not professional baseball.
Yeah.
And so once you get into a black and white strike zone, umpires are basically taught that they'd rather call strikes balls than call balls that are outside the strike zone strikes. And so what ends up happening is you have a smaller strike zone. And I think you've kind of seen it as TrackMan's been around and as the last couple of years, offensives have kind of shot through the roof. Is I think you have a smaller strike zone. You have baseballs that are probably a little bit firmer and fly a little bit farther. So now all of a sudden it's brought a lot of excitement in terms of offenses, but at the same time, our rosters are smaller. And now I think you're going to have, I think you're going to see a lot of offense throughout the country just because I think the strike zones are just going to be so small.
I do feel like now umpiring is so much better than it was 10, 15 years ago. When I go back and watch some of those games, it feels like it's just the wild west of guessing when it came to balls and strikes. So
the accountability portion on a midweek game when you're, a non-power 4 school and you go to the University of, you go to University of Texas back in the 1980s, you knew what that strike zone was going to be. It was going to be huge and you were going to get the benefit of the doubt. Now with TV and social media and TrackMan, I think you have, the umpires have, done a phenomenal job of getting better at their craft and continuing to evolve. And I think TrackMan is just another tool for them to be able to analyze. Instead of looking at a game, now they can look at, a TrackMan report. And we get the TrackMan reports too and understand, okay, we have, Kyle coming in to umpire our game on Friday. What is his tendency? Is he a east to west strike zone umpire? Is he a north to south? It factors in a little bit in terms of what you do, but for the most part, I think those guys do a really good job.
Okay.
First reported by the Buddy System newsletter in December, and then made more broad this last couple weeks. But feasibility study for the new stadium, looking at whether it's a renovation or whether it's a full rebuild. Are you pushing to move the left field fence in to like 300?
No.
Okay. Just to know if we're trying to match any SEC stadiums.
Yeah, we got to pump these numbers up, Coach.
I think, the feasibility study, they've done it before. They've done it before, but with very little appetite to move on it.
Okay.
And I think where we're at now, I think the feasibility study is one where it's not just let's see what we can do and then we'll think about doing it later. I think this is the one sport in terms of creating revenue that I think we can create a lot more revenue with increased luxury seating. If you look at basketball, football, that you've kind of tapped out that market in terms of, people getting into the suites and having luxury seating. At baseball, there really isn't any luxury seating with the exception of maybe, the 3, I don't even know what you'd call them, down the right field line and
or cabanas or something.
Yeah, cabanas, and then the little, down the third base line right by our dugout. There's little seating there, but it's pretty hot in Lupton Stadium, as you know, when it gets warm. And I think expanding the roof and being able to have a place where you can have some indoor outdoor seating and be able to have better concessions and more restrooms and just bring it up to date. That's the big thing. It was. Back in 2003, they were talking about getting rid of baseball, and that's when this stadium was built. Back in 2003, they moved it from where the football practice field is now to here, and I think they spent $7 to $10 million on the stadium in 2003, and kept the program afloat. And so now I think we've kind of outgrown that in terms of our fan base, and also just the program in general. In terms of when you show up to our ballpark. You walk in and it's something that I think, once you get in the stadium and the setting is phenomenal. I think it's just all the other things around the stadium that could be improved. And I think, we'll see what the appetite is from our fan base, but I think it's really good. I think it's really going to be fun to see where this thing goes. And it's going to be pretty quick. Sounds like hopefully we can get a feasibility study and start raising the money and hopefully break ground by June of 27.
I will miss Lupton, though, when that date comes. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts from they've been interviewing players on other teams in the Big 12, and almost unanimously when they ask, what's the hardest away stadium to play at, they almost all say TCU. So I hope we can keep that vibe.
I think that I always when I first got into coaching at Cal State Fullerton, we came and played here. And that was the one thing that I always remembered was how on top of you the fans were and what a home field advantage it was. And that's something that whether we just do a renovation or a complete redo, that's something that's going to be taken into consideration, because I think it is a definite advantage here in terms of home field. And I don't want it to become a corporate type setup, where you come to the ballpark and you're not attached to the field of the players. I want it to be on top of you. I want it to be loud. And I want it to be where our fans and our players and our program are interacting and engage with one another. And it's not corporate and white collar where everyone just sits back and, you don't feel like you're at a college baseball stadium. I think there's a way to do that. And I'm super excited to see what we can do.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. So, Coach, we recently started a Patreon. It's patreon.com/Upton Drinking Club. If you're interested in subscribing, just kidding. Just had to throw that out there. But I opened up the floor for the subscribers to ask questions. So I have a couple here. One comes from subscriber Travis. He wants to know if the unseasonably warm winter had an effect on the grape yields out in California.
Well, I think wine consumption in general is down. You know what I mean? Like, that's what my brother tells me out in Cali. I think the wine business has been struggling a little bit as a whole. But the production in and of itself, I don't think the weather factored as much. But I'm only the plural S on Saarloos and Sons. Okay. I've only picked grapes one time in my life. And so I'll reserve that question maybe for Keith. But but Keith's doing great. His, Saarloos and Sons has been, doing great for a long time, and wine club memberships and all that stuff is still great. His daughter Brielle is here at TCU, and our grapes and our wine is in the 150th anniversary bottle for TCU. So it's really cool in terms of overlap in his life and mine.
Very nice. And then Subby Alex, he asks, and you may have already answered this in a roundabout way, but I'll ask. He says, how can you balance gaining valuable freshman experience and maximizing your chances of success? Now, again, there's only 6 freshmen, and a lot of them are, thinking they're going to play a huge role anyway. But just in a general term, like, take this year out of it.
Well, I mean, if you look at last year, you look at this year too, you try to put those guys in spots where you feel like they're ready for the spot you give them. Mm-hmm. Last year and by design, we put those guys, we kind of threw them out in the deep end. Franco was hit 4th. I think Stroh hit later in the lineup, I believe, his first game. But, Cade Udy came in. I think it was bases loaded for his first appearance.
Yeah.
Mason Brassfield, the same thing. And so a lot of it is you feel like you kind of know who you can throw out there in certain situations and who can handle them. And sometimes, like Braden Taylor, if you want to go back to
he didn't start, right?
No, I think it was his 3rd game.
Yeah.
In Globe Life, he didn't start game 1. He didn't start game 2, and then he started game 3, and it never came out. So sometimes they force your hand. That's what you're wanting to have happen. We don't write the lineup. They basically tell us who needs to play. And they've been doing that for the last 6 weeks here against each other. And so now, when the lights do come on, some guys take it to another level. Some guys regress a little bit. And so this will be a great test early on, with the 3 games inside Globe Life, followed by another one against UTA, and then going out to California and playing UCLA on the road. So we're going to find out in our first 7-8 games kind of where things are at, and then reevaluate and move forward.
MK, I have 2 more, so I'll pass it over to you. And
we had Stephen Schock, friend of the pod, on a couple weeks ago, and he mentioned, through our roundabout conversation, he said that playing at the Cape for him was even more special than going to Omaha. He said it had nothing to do with getting shelled in Omaha; those are totally unrelated. But just the experience for the players there. But also, he mentioned that some coaches have decided not to send their players or not recommend their players go there because they're going to get poached by other teams. So I guess I just want to gather your thoughts on that. Obviously, Baumler was there this year, and we hope to continue sending players there. But how do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's becoming more and more like that. I know there's a lot of teams from around the country that feel that way because the Cape, besides Team USA, the Cape is probably where the most prospects go. But it's also a very interesting situation when your players get there because they're going to be around other great players. And next thing you know, they're going to talk about what's it like there, what's it like here, how much you getting paid at your place, what are you getting, how much are you getting paid? And then next thing you know, it's these conversations kind of erupt into that player starts recruiting that other player, and then he reports back to his coach. And there's a lot of programs that bend the rules or go around the system to try and get, let him know if he's interested. We'd love to. This would be the parameters in which he would get scholarship and money wise, and if he would get in the portal. And so that's what's happening. Like if I'm a group of 5 program, I'm not sending any of my players out.
Mm-hmm.
And now a lot of times too, there's with training and with pitching, like you're starting to see a lot of the pitchers not even go out anymore. So summer baseball in general, there's so much value to it for guys, but there's also a lot of things where you got to kind of weigh the positives to the negatives. And so I still think there's value to it, but it definitely is something where, when I played, it was you go out for summer ball and you don't come home until the last game's done. And now guys will go out for 2 weeks and then shut it down and come home because their agent told them to. So there's so many different things and so many different headaches with summer ball nowadays where some of it doesn't really the negatives far outweigh the positives.
Yeah. All right. I have, I'll just finish my last two. One is about the team, and then I have another one about you specifically. So this one, pretty simple. Who are the standout leaders on the team? Obviously we could guess Cole Kramer, Tommy Lepore, maybe Nolan Traeger, but you're around the team every day. How would you answer that?
I think on the field, I think we have a great group of leaders in like the whole group, but at the end of fall practice, we have our exit meetings with each individual player, spend about 20 minutes with each player. And one of the questions I asked was, and we in my time here, we really have never done captains. And after this fall, I wanted to open it up to our players. And so, it was me and the coaching staff and each player, like I said. And one of the questions that we went over is if you could pick 4 guys, who are 4 guys that are captains in your mind. And we had told them that they would be asked that a day in advance. So it wasn't just, dropped on them when they were in here. And it was pretty much to a man. It was, like you said, it was Lepore, Kramer, Traeger, and then Louis Rodriguez.
Okay.
So you have 2 position players. You got 2 pitchers. You got different age groups, right? Louis is a senior. Treg's a sophomore. Tommy's a junior. And then Cole's a senior. So you kind of have some older guys in that group with the sophomore. And so I think what it was able for them to be able to do was understand not so much that they need to do anything differently, but it came from their peers. And their peers were the ones, and it was pretty unanimous about who they thought were the 4 guys that embodied kind of what selfless excellence and energy means to this program. And I think it was pretty indicative of those 4 guys when everybody on the roster said the same 4.
Interesting. Okay. And then finally, so I would assume that being a big-time Division I coach, there's pressure every year.
Mm-hmm.
But do you feel any added pressure going into this year, given the talent on paper with this team?
No, not really. I think every year, like you said, you feel pressure because you want to win. You want your players to have a great season. You want to be able to win, and because there's so many people that has so much interest and enjoyment around Fort Worth and TCU from sporting events, from baseball, from you go to the national championship game in football and you're part of that as a fan.
Mm-hmm.
And you see what that means to a university. Same thing with basketball, same thing when we go to Omaha. So you want that for the program, you want that for the city, you want that for the school. And then you want your players to be able to have an experience where they can look back on it when it's all done and talk about what an amazing season the 26th season was. And I think once you start getting outside of that, and there's enough pressure internally that once you start, worrying about things outside that you can't control, it's kind of a waste of time. So the way I look at it is I would way rather have pressure on a group of players in a program because there's expectations, because it matters to them. Mm-hmm. There's investment and it matters to TCU. Baseball, it matters here. And so, if it didn't matter, then I would feel no pressure. But I understand that it does matter to our university and our city and our school. And I'm privileged that we have pressure.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I guess I could probably speak for the rest of the guys, but we're excited for every, game day or, first game of the season, but this one especially to kind of get the season rolling. So with that said, come join us at Sports and Social, 4 p.m. on Saturday for a pregame taste of the Rockies. As always, Coach, grateful for just a few minutes of your time. Can't wait. And best of luck this weekend and during the season. Go Frogs.
You bet, guys. Thanks for all your support, man. You guys are the best.
Thanks, Coach. Go Frogs.
Take care.
Go Frogs.